said in 1974, you and I would be doing this shit, man.
I know. Nobody.
It's amazing we have.
It's incredible. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another story in the life of the old-time rock and roller. Today, we are starting a brand new feature called the Untold Rock Legends. And today, we're featuring my good friend that we had started playing together about 50 years ago, drummer extraordinaire, Mr. Ty Grimes, who has worked with everybody from Ricky Nelson, Tim Weisburg, Captain Beefheart, Benois King, Smokin' Joe Kubek, Tutu Jones, Jean-Luc Ponty, Captain Beefheart, a whole bunch of other ones. Welcome aboard, Ty. How are you, buddy?
Thank you, man. Thank you, Forrest. Good to see you, my friend.
Man, I'll tell you what, you told me on the phone yesterday. I knew I worked last night because I woke up and everything I had was sore. Because you played the hell out of those drums, man.
I still hit as hard as I did when I was 24, and that's how I play.
Yeah.
I don't know any other way to play, and that's how I play. But man, I feel it now. It's like I can always tell how good I played by how bad I hurt the next day.
Yeah, it's incredible. Hey, let me tell our audience, who do you think had the first set of electronic drums? Those electric drums came out in the 80s and all that stuff. I got to tell you, Ty had his next door neighbor was the engineer, and he put microphones in all of Ty's drums. And Ty, I believe you had a Ranchero, a big long.
Yeah.
Right. And he was the only drummer I knew that traveled with his own PA system.
It got outrageous. The deal was Joe Pollard, who was my next door neighbor. We shared two guest houses in Hollywood. He invented syndromes, which are like electric pads.
Yes.
And he didn't play enough, and he kept bringing all this stuff over here. Take this to your gig. Tell me how you like it. Tell me what you don't like. Blah blah blah. So I did, and I came back to him and said, "Man, coming off a real drum, it feels like I'm hitting a practice pad. They just don't feel like drums." And I said, "What's inside these things?" And he said, "Reverse transducers." And I said, "Well, open one up." And I said, "Well, why don't you just mount those in my acoustic drums and get plugins on each drum?" And he went, "Bring me your drum set." And he did, and it turned in. I knew a friend who had an A7, which was huge, 18-inch folded horn, and the mixer for the electric drums. Then I borrowed an Echoplex from somebody else. I don't even remember where I got that. And man, unloading all that stuff, they sounded incredible. But man, I just needed a whole crew to set it all up,
I mean, on the back of a guitar, you see the normal plug-in guitar jack. And on Ty's drums, you see, like, here's a tom-tom with it. Plug in your guitar jack here, and here's the snare and plug in your guitar jack. At least that's how I remembered it.
Well, it was. I mean, the snare drum had a plug-in, bass drum had a plug-in, the two mountaintops had a plug-in, and the floor tom had a plug-in. So there's 5 plug-ins. Then I had to go, that's right, I had to go into a Sun Coliseum mixer to plug in all 5. And then I had to go through the mixing board to get the levels, and ran it through a 18-inch Voice of the Theater back in the day. The cabinet was huge, but it did sound amazing.
Oh, I mean, you had the greatest drum sound. Ariel, our bass player, he played a precision, I think, with an SVT amp and Ampeg. And me and Bob Zinner both had 50-watt Marshall stacks with the 2 cabinets. And he even had Eric Clapton's cabinets, because after the Cream played the LA Forum, they went to the Guitar Center the next day and traded in all their gear. And the guy who worked there called Bobby and said, "Hey, I've got Clapton's Marshall cabinet down here. You want it?" He said, "I'll be right there." So when we practiced, on the back of it, it still had the cream stencil on it. And
yeah, that was very cool.
yeah,
Very
man.
cool indeed.
So we had total pro sound, man, and we were fighting in an age where disco and Saturday Night Fever and
Oh,
that whole Art Rufus and the whole wave of Earth, Wind and Fire, the New Birth, all these guys, man, they were great R&B artists, but man, we were rockers and we wanted to put those Gibsons to work, and and basically because we all were in other bands, and so our band,
yeah.
of course, originally the Drugged Mutants, um, we changed the name for commercial purposes when we were auditioning for Wooden Nickel Records, the RCA distributor, Bobby Zinner's brother-in-law or something. But we had a heck of a time, but it was all just for entertainment for us. It was like, we can all play. We need an outlet to just get together and jam and go crazy. And after, I don't know, a couple of months, we started, I think, down in Mars Studio. We ended up, I don't know if it was SIR or where, but man, we used to wail and had a hell of a good time.
Well, that was the deal, man. It's like we all had paying gigs, and we needed the money, so we kept the paying gigs, but it's not what we really wanted to play.
Right.
So that's when I hooked up with you again and said, "Hey, man, let's put something together and rock, man." And I had that electric drum set. And I laughed to myself yesterday about when we played the Hollywood Palladium, and our friend, there it is, right there.
Oh,
That's the set.
that's the set.
That's it. When we played the Hollywood Palladium, and we had our friend come up with that dry ice smoke machine.
The smoke machine, yeah, the fog.
Yeah.
Wild in the streets. We were playing Wild in the Streets, and Tony Carey on organ. He was rocking his organ back and forth. And
Yeah.
I think Tony had already been in Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow at the time, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and quit.
You,
And some stripper came up on the stage and threw her clothes off on his organ, and I think he dumped her in the organ. A bunch of stage guys came up and carried her off with her legs kicking up in the air.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
fog,
Hollywood.
the fog was
Hollywood.
Hollywood.
Fun.
The fog was so heavy when the final band went on, the stage was covered in water.
What was hilarious about it is I had an echo repeat on the drums. I remember on our last song, I threw total echo on every drum I had, where it was going waboo, 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 wab. And I was on a riser. So when I stepped off the riser, it went splash. And I looked down and went, what? The whole stage was covered in at least 1 inch of water, the whole entire stage, because the guy had the wrong mix on the smoke machine. There's too much water.
That was funny. They used to hold the Oscars there too.
Well, and before that, before the NAMM show became huge, they used to have the NAMM show at the Hollywood Palladium in the back.
Oh, wow.
And the first band I was in, I think it was a band called The Triangle, the trio from my hometown. Acoustic had just come out with their amps.
Oh, yeah.
And we walked into their booth. They had a separate room. And we went, oh, hey, we got a band. And they said, well, plug in and turn them up as loud as you want. Well, shit. It was like 11, you know. And the windows were shaking. It was so loud. But Casey Kasem came by and heard us. The number one DJ in LA at the time. And he liked us. And hey, cool. Casey likes us, man. So we played all of he did teen dances all over Southern California. And he hired us. And we played worked with Casey for, God, about 2 years.
Oh, that's really cool.
And he ended up getting us our first record deal. He said, "Man, you guys need a record deal." And we said, "Well, yeah, that would be nice." So he goes, "I know a guy who's just starting a label. He's got tons of money. He's a very good businessman. I'll talk to him." So we said, "Okay." Go to his office. It was Mike Curb. And he signed us to this little label he had. And we finally finished the album. And it was released the same day Fresh Cream was released.
Oh, no competition there.
Yeah. So it was like, well, nobody's going to want to hear our record. So that's what happened with that. And then later on, I got that Rick Nelson gig and then, all the other gigs.
Well, let's time out for a second. We'll tell our audience at home. Ty is originally from El Paso, Texas, or thereabouts, right? Lives in the Austin, Texas area where I was born. And if it was Rick Nelson your first really big gig?
Yeah.
Why don't we start the story there?
Okay. No, I was playing around town in little bars with local guys, rehearsing at Mars with whoever was coming through, And I had a guitar player friend who had a friend that went to work for MCA Records, a guy named Lindy Getz. And Rick Nelson was signed to MCA Records. And Rick's manager was coming in all the time talking to the record company. And Lindy got to know Rick's manager because Rick's manager was his cousin. And his name was Willie. For real. His name was Willie Nelson. That's Rick's cousin, not the country Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
And he was a real nice guy. So anyway, Lindy and he became good friends. And he was up there one day and Lindy was talking to him. And he said, "Yeah, Rick had to fire his band and we have a gig at the Houston Astrodome in 2 days and we're desperate for a band." And Lindy said, "I know a trio that'd be perfect." So boom, gives me a call. And I went, "Why are you calling me? I want to play with Led Zeppelin, And he said, "Oh, well, he's got a hit record and everything. The record company's behind him." And I said, "Well, I'll do the audition. It'd be cool just to meet him. Grew up watching him on TV." So we showed up at SIR, me, the guitar player, and we grabbed the bass player and rehearsed one day. And he asked us to come back the next day. And the three of us are walking to the parking lot. And I said, "Guys, we just got the gig." And they went, "No, he didn't say that we had the gig." "Yeah, we're coming back tomorrow. He doesn't have time to audition anyone else because we got to play the Astrodome on Wednesday." And so we come back the next day. And then on Wednesday, we fly to Houston, jump on the plane with Rick, fly to Houston, and play the Astrodome in front of 52,000 people.
That had to be a rush.
That was the first gig. And that was the first big gig I ever played. It was like, okay, here's big time stuff. Yeah. And it went on from there. I mean, we got back and kept rehearsing. He had to do an album. And we all, were going into the studio for that. And then we did the Windfall album in between road gigs. We come back off the road, cut 4 tracks, and we go back out on the road for a month, and then we come back in and cut 4 more tracks, So we had a gig at Carnegie Hall. First time I'd ever been to New York, and we played Carnegie Hall. Limos picked us up at the airport, police escort to the hotel. And I'm going, "Hey, I like this stuff, man." So yeah, that was the first biggie, and sold out performance at Carnegie Hall, 3 encores. I mean, Andy Warhol was there. A couple of the guys from the Young Rascals were there. And, Warhol took us all out to dinner and threw a private party for us. And Gene Cornish from the Rascals was there at the show. And he asked, I think we did it on a Saturday night. And Gene says, how long are you guys going to be in town? And I said, well, I think the other guys are leaving, but I got some friends here in town. I'm going to be around. Why? He says, well, me and Dino are recording at Hendrix's studio on Monday. Why don't you drop in? Well, duh.
Dino Danelli was an incredible drummer, right?
He was my idol, man. When I was watching him on Ed Sullivan, I went, that guy rocks, man. And so we show up at Hendrix's studio, the Electric Lady studio. Looked like nothing from the outside. No sign, no nothing, just this funky old green door. Have to buzz you in. And we walked in, and it was like the control room on the spaceship Enterprise when you walked in. I think back then it even had a 32 channel board, computerized board. It was awesome. And Gene's there, and Dino was late, but it was so Dino walks in. Now this guy's been my idol for years, and here he walks in, and Gene says, "Hey, Gene, Dino, this is Ty Grimes. He just played Carnegie Hall with Rick Nelson." "Oh, hey, man, how you doing?" Shook my hand and everything. "Hey, man, great to see you, boy. I bet that was fun." "Yeah, it was." And he runs out to the studio, starts banging around on the drum set. And I'm just sitting there going, wow, man. Wow, how cool. And then Dino says, "Hey, Ty." I kind of look up from the control room and I kind of nod at him. He goes, "There's another set of drums out here, man. Come out here and play double drummers with me." I went, oh my, trying to keep my cool, and I went, oh my God. And then I did, went out and played double drummers with Dino Danelli, man, at Jimi Hendrix's studio. So when I got on that plane back to LA, it was like I was literally on cloud nine. It was like, and I flew over my hometown, direct flight, flew over my hometown and looked down and went, let's see any of you guys top the week I just had. So yeah, that was awesome, man.
What a story, man. Incredible.
Yeah. So that was my beginnings.
Yeah. So Rick eventually played out, right?
Yeah.
And you worked with Rick for what, a year?
About a year and a half. The album was released, and it was his last album on MCA. His contract had run out, and for some reason, they didn't promote it. MCA did not promote it, and it hit the top 100 at 99. 199, I'm sorry. And the next week, it was off the top 200.
Wow.
And there was like 3 hits on that record, and nobody picked up on it. So from then on, I mean, the reason I took that gig is because I figured, hey, there's a very good chance that we could have a hit.
Yeah.
And then, boom, it just went away. Well, if we're not going to get a hit, then I really need to find something else.
Yeah. So I imagine all that time you were meeting other cats and other players on the road and such.
Oh yeah, I mean that was the deal. That once I got that gig, I could get in any VIP room in Hollywood. At the Whiskey, at the Roxy, at the Rainbow, at the Troubadour. All I had to say is like, "Hey man, Ty Grimes, Stone Canyon Band, come right on in." So I was meeting all kinds of people. Yeah. And I remember one time I went into the Troubadour to see Dr. John was playing. I'd met him on the road. So I walk into the Troubadour bar and I hear this guy go, "Hey, Ty." And I look over and it's this artist friend of mine named Boyd Elder. Well, he did 2 Eagles album covers and he's on the back of the Desperado album.
Mm-hmm.
So he's standing up, waving me over and says, "Here, come and sit with us." I said, "Okay, cool." And I was playing with Rick. So I walk over to the table and he's sitting there with Don Henley and Glenn Frey. So he's going, "Oh yeah, Ty plays with Rick Nelson. Oh yeah, well, Randy Weiser played with Rick Nelson." So it was kind of like, "Okay, nice meeting you all. Now let's get drunk, you know. Now let's tequila shots for everybody." Yeah.
Tequila sunrise.
Yeah, so it was like Yahoo time. So yeah, I met quite a few people, man, and that really opened a lot of doors.
Yeah.
You know, from playing it with Rick, you know, that just opened up everything.
So what was the next big gig?
Well, I had a meeting with Rick and told him that we both agreed I would be happier in a rock band. And so I had about 2 weeks off. And oddly enough, yeah, you remember all of the guys who worked at record companies, they change record companies about every 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, so Lindy Getz quits MCA and he goes to Mercury. So I get another call from Lindy Getz, the same guy who got me the Rick gig. And he says, "Hey, Captain Beefheart needs a band. He's already got 6 weeks in Canada, in the U.S. book, and 6 weeks in Canada, and then 6 weeks in Europe. And he just fired his whole band, and all this stuff's already booked." And I met some guys on the road that we met up in L.A. They all quit their bands, and we all ran into each other, put a band together, and we were all starving, and said, "Well," I remember we had an opportunity to go play Las Vegas. And Beefheart's manager came in and said, "Look, he's got all these gigs, US tour, Canadian tour, European tour. And do you guys want to do this gig with Beefheart?" And we looked at each other and said, "Well, let's see. Has anybody been to Europe?" "Nope." "Okay, Las Vegas or Europe?" "We'll take Europe." "Okay, we'll go with that." So that's where the Beefheart gig came from.
I mean, 5 months almost total, right? 6 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, we came home from, we did the US tour first and the Canadian tour 6 weeks. And I think we had 4 days off. And then we went to Europe. So it was just long enough to pay your bills, do your laundry, and repack.
Yeah. What kind of money was he paying, like compared to Rick, for instance?
Oddly enough, he paid $200 a week more than Rick Nelson in cash.
Yeah.
Every week, which, you know, kind of angered me. It's like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. How can he afford that? So anyway, yeah, so he paid more than Rick paid. And it was all cash, and we had to hire per diem. And it was an interesting gig, but the band was some very good players that I ended up playing with later on too. But
what was any wild just episodes that you can think of? One particular Captain Beefheart moment?
Well, there was plenty of them because he was very, how I say, eccentric, you know, and always arguing with sound guys, PA guys, you know, throwing microphones down on the ground, walking off stage. But one in particular, we were playing in Paris, I think, and this French guy comes back, and management and everybody were sitting in the dressing room. And French guy comes in and says, "Look, we only have half the money go ahead and play the gig, and we'll give you the balance, when you're done. And we had Beefheart had these two managers, DiMartino brothers, two Italian guys from New York, and, and they and they had, hey, you guys right here thing going on.
How you doing?
So, hey, I got this right here. So anyway, one of the manager guys opens his briefcase, pulls out a 45, closes a briefcase, puts a 45 on top of the briefcase, says, we ain't playing until you give us all the money. And boy, there was a big silence. We were going, this might be tense. And we didn't play, man, until we got all the money, but it pissed off the French guys.
Yeah.
So when we were going back to the tour bus, he divided the money. He gave us all big stacks of money. Here, stick this in your pocket, stick that in your pocket, and we'll all back to the bus, and I'll be holding a 45 on everybody. And we did. It was like, whew, man, let's get back to the bus, lay down on the ground, on the floor so they don't shoot us through the windows. But yeah, that was one. And he was pretty crazy. I've on the first tour, we were on the airplane, and I figured, if I get to know this guy, I'm going to go sit with him and talk to him and kind of get to know this guy. So I'll kind of try and understand where he's coming from, which was the biggest mistake, because then I turned into his buddy. He called me at 4 a.m. Hey man, hey, I need to talk to you. I go, I've been drinking a lot, and I've got somebody here with me, and can I meet you for coffee in the morning? No, man, right now. No, you got to come to my room right now. I went, oh my God. So he did that a couple of times. So after about, 2 weeks, we told management, put us in a separate hotel and don't tell them where we are. And we'll do sound checks. And the only time we'll see him is on the gig. So that kind of smoothed things out after that.
Did that upset him a little, or?
Not really, because he had his wife, she was with him all the time. So it didn't really bother him.
When you'd go to his room at 4 a.m, where would she be?
She's right there. He's in his pajamas. And I seeing that I brought that up, I got to tell you what he told me. I get up to his room that first time, 4 a.m. I'm drunk as I could be, trying to be, shake it off. And I go, okay, man, what's so important that it couldn't wait till tomorrow? He's sitting on the edge of the bed in pajamas. His wife's in the bed. And he goes, did you know that people in California are cutting off the beaks of pelicans? And your reaction was the same as mine. I thought he was kidding. And I went, what? People are cutting off the top beaks of pelicans in California. And I went,
what are you going to do about it, Captain?
Yeah. Doesn't that bother you? And I said, well, of course it does, but we're in England. No, we're in France. We can't do anything about it right now. Well, I knew you'd care. Yeah, well, I really care, but I'm going back to bed now, okay? Well, okay, man, but I knew you'd care. Oh, God. It was like, okay, Don, thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, there was plenty of those, but all in all, that he was a good guy, and he really was a good performer. Mm-hmm. And he was a good harp player. Yeah. He played really good blues harp, and he really knew how to perform. Man, he really got crowds going, and we played some big festivals, all over Europe. Wow. There's a big one in Holland called Pink Pop Festival, which was like 35,000 people. And then we jump on a charter plane, fly back to London, and play somewhere that night in London. So, you know, all in all, it was rock and roll, and it was fun,
Cool.
you know. So that was that one.
Yeah, yeah. And then,
So,
so you had a little time off, or you got back to the LA and your phone started ringing, or you were beating the bushes at SIR or Mars?
no, I it just flashed on what it was at the end of the American tour. We played a festival in Phoenix, and that was the last gig on the American tour. And Kathy McDonald was on the bill, and we met Kathy McDonald. So when I got back from Europe with Beefheart, I was cruising Sunset, just checking out who was playing. And at Gazzari's, I see Kathy McDonald, and I went, "Oh man, Kathy, I know her." So parked, and I pulled in, and guess who was playing guitar? You.
Wow, what timing?
And that's when I met you.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I met Claudia Lanier through her too. Brown Sugar.
Oh yeah, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Leon and Don Preston, when we were at the Whiskey for 3 nights, Leon's guitar player, Don Preston, came down and said, "Man, I'm really impressed with your guitar playing. Man, you're really fucking good. Let's be friends." And you know, they did that shootout at the plantation, and
Oh yeah.
Bird, and you know, all the great songs.
Well, what was funny is when we played Carnegie Hall with Rick, Claudia Lanier was the opening act.
Oh, that is wild.
Yeah. Yeah. So Claudia was around, the same thing. I knew Don Preston, played a couple of gigs with Don Preston.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, I met you through that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got that gig with Tim Weisburg and stayed with him for 3 years. I did 3 albums with Tim.
I remember you calling me and saying, "Hey, I'm at the Troubadour with Tim Weisburg. Why don't you come down?" And I was living in West Hollywood, not far from La Cienega.
Yeah.
I came on over, and it was very impressive. I said, "Wow, this guy, he's playing a lot of different stuff here."
Well, that's what I liked about Tim, because a good buddy of mine was Rick Jagger. He played drums with Dave Mason. And when I was with Rick, we were at SIR, and Dave Mason was across the hall. And our bass player knew Mason's bass player. So we'd take a break, we'd go into Dave Mason's rehearsal.
Yeah.
And I was a fan of Rick Jagger's drumming before I ever met him. You know, I heard Dave Mason records, and man, that drummer, boy, plays really good. I really like how that guy plays. And then I met him, and he was a wild, crazy, funny dude, man, but played great. And it ended up, I moved into this security building in Hollywood, real close to A&M Records. But you know how Hollywood was, you know, change your name and live in a security building where nobody can get to you, you know. So anyway, Rick ended up, there's an elevator in that apartment building. I was standing on the main floor waiting for the elevator to go to my apartment. The door opens. There's Rick Jagger, Dave Mason's drummer, who I just met. And I went, "Hey, what are you doing here?" He goes, "I just moved in. What are you doing here?" I said, "I live here." So we became hanging buddies, man, you know. And he got me the gig with Tim Weisburg.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because after Beefheart, I hit SIR and, you know, hung out. And, you know, there were some gigs, but I didn't really like them, you know, or they didn't pay very well, or, you know. So anyway, I went to Rick's apartment one time, and he was walking out his front door with suitcases. And I went, where are you going? He goes, well, I got to go up to Marin County and record with Mason. And he goes, oh, are you still looking for a gig? And I went, yeah. And he runs into the house, calls up Tim Weisburg, and says, hey, man, are you still auditioning drummers? And he went, yes. And he says, cancel everybody. I got the guy. And Tim said, what? He says, cancel any guy you got scheduled, cancel it. I got the guy. This is the guy you need. Don't audition anybody else. And I'm standing there going, okay. So Rick looked, can you be at SIR tomorrow at 1? Yeah, I can. Okay, man. He'll be there, Tim. Bye. And he picks up his suitcases, and I follow him down the hall, and I go, Rick, what does he do? I've heard his name, but I've never heard his music. And he says, trust me, man, as a drummer, you'll love it. So I went, okay. I never heard anything by Tim Weisburg. So I show up at SIR, and I knew the guitar player. So that was kind of cool. Yeah. Oh, you're in this band? Oh, and he was a very good player. And I went, oh, well, cool. I'll hear some good guitar playing. So I said, okay, how do you guys want to do this? And they said, well, we'll just kick off some grooves, and you just jump in and play whatever you feel. Well, no one ever told me that. No, play it like this. No, I don't like the bass drum pattern they're playing. Play it like this. Play what you feel. Okay. And they kick off some songs, man. And I mean, they're smoking. I'm going, whew, man, I've really got to up my game to play with these guys. So we do that for like half an hour, go through all kinds of, other grooves and all kinds of, ups and downs. And to show my ignorance, there was a microphones there, but they never sang. Well, so, after we run through some stuff, Tim's up there, and I said, so, we've run through all these grooves and stuff. Tim, do you want to sing one now? And the whole band laughed. And I didn't know. I went, what? And Tim looks at me laughing, saying, you aren't familiar with my music, are you? And I went, no, honestly, I'm not, man. I've heard your name, and I've never heard of what you do. Why? And he says, we're instrumental band. And I went, what? I said, there's no singing? And he went, no, it's an instrumental band. Do you want the gig? And I said, let me get this straight. I will never have to put up with the front guy's singer? And he went, no. And I went, I'll take it. But I use the F word in front of singer. I won't have to put up with an effing singer. And he said, no, it's instrumental all the time. Do you want the gig? I said, yes, sir, I'll take it. Because it was challenging, man. Those guys were excellent players. Yeah. And so he hands me a plane ticket. Yeah. And says, we start a 6-week tour tomorrow. I went, I don't know your stuff. And the keyboard player says, we'll rehearse the sound checks. Don't worry about it. We love your feel. Your feel is exactly what we want. We want more of a rock feel. And don't worry about it. And I was scared to death, man, because they called off the name of a song. I didn't know what it was. It's like, how does that go? I don't know. So anyway, we did a 6-week tour, and I got it together. And boy, those guys gave me a workout, man. Yeah. It was challenging. Mm. And I stuck with them for 3 years. I did 3 albums with them, 2 on A&M. The second one was a live album that we did at the Troubadour, and that's when I called you. We were doing a live album. Mm-hmm. Neat. And so I did 2 on A&M. His contract ran out, and there's kind of a bidding war because he was very popular at that time. And United Artists signed him, and we got a whole bunch of front money. Built our own stages. We hired a light crew. We had our own sound crew. Had 3 trucks. Had 4-guy road crew. And it was like, okay, now we're stepping up. This is totally cool. So we get a call. Tim gets a call from the record company and says, look, there's this movie coming out on United Artists, and we want you guys to cut the single before you do your album. Okay. And Mike Post is going to produce it. Well, Mike Post has done every TV theme on the face of the earth. And so we show up at Western Studios. And first of all, I'm playing 2 26-inch bass drums and these big power toms. And all I did in Hollywood is argue with engineers because, we can't get a drum sound. Your drums are too big. And I'd always say, well, there's this band in England called Led Zeppelin. It's the same size as John Bonham's. So I always had a problem with engineers. So I walk into Mike Post, and that's the first thing I say to him because Mike Post was no nonsense, no wasted time, strictly business kind of guy. No sitting around drinking beer, smoking joints with this guy, So I walked in and I said, Mike, you got 2 26-inch bass drums with front heads on them, nothing in them, and 4 big power toms. Is that going to be a problem? And he went, no, I love big drums. I'll set you up in the middle of the room. I'll put the amps in the corners and partition them off. Beautiful. Boom. All right. So we did that, and we cut the theme for Rocky, for the movie Rocky. And he had the Hollywood horns and what's his name? Paul Buckmaster came in and put strings on it. He did all of Elton John stuff. So that was amazing. So anyway,
Stallone didn't wander in by any chance.
No. I mean, it was real no wasted time. We cut the track, and Mike Post didn't like the bass player. The bass player kept flubbing the part. So everybody leaves. It's just me and Tim and Mike Post, and Mike Post starts isolating tracks. He's going, man, I'm hearing something that's bugging me. He starts isolating everything. It's not on the drum track. And I'm going, phew, good. Okay. Yay, he likes my drum track. So he isolates the bass. And he goes, that's it. And he looks at Tim and he goes, I can't live with that. And Tim says, well, what do you want to do? He says, I want to bring Lee Sklar in and have him redo the bass line. Mm-hmm. Okay, go for it. And he did. What was funny is I met Lee Sklar like 3 years later at Studio 55. He was cutting some tracks for somebody. Met him in the hallway and introduced myself. Said, we've never met, but we're on a record together. And he went, oh, really? And he was really cool, man. He said, what record's that? And I told him, Rocky with Mike Post. He said, oh, man, I really loved your drumming. I said, well, I loved your bass playing because he did lead-ins to my drum fills. So anyway, that was that. But I stayed with Tim for like 3 years. Did a second album on A&M, a live album. And then when he got signed to United Artists, we go up to Sausalito to the record plant. And we had Chuck Leavell playing keyboard. Tower Power Horn section came in, and I went to Tim and I said, hey, Tim, I'd like to have Rick Jagger play drums. And he went, oh, do you want Rick to play? And what, you don't want to play? And I went, no, double. I want us to play together. Well, Rick had played with Tim. So Tim went, whoa, that would be, I said, yeah, that would be something. And we were buddies, so there was no competition. He'd play half a drum fill and I'd complete it. and back and forth like that. And we were panned on opposite sides. So the drums, when you do a drum fill, they cross in the middle and go to the opposite side.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Wow.
And then they put Tower Power horn section on there. And it was, hearing it back with me and Rick playing at the same time, it was like, whoa, man, it was really something.
What album was that?
It was called TWB. See, and Tim didn't write most of the songs. His guitar player and the band wrote most of the songs because they were instrumental.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would come up with, well, how about playing this lick here, or why don't we do this there? I would get a co-writers. I got signed to ASCAP as a songwriter, which was very cool. And so anyway, the band started, and Tim would show up, or Tim wouldn't show up for rehearsals, but the band would.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd play a gig. Tim would know his parts,
Turnabout is fair play, right?
Yeah, so the guitar player would chart out Tim's part. Here, play this, and jump all over him when he didn't play it right. So then, they said, man, Tim doesn't do this. And, we come up with all the music. I said, well, why don't we, change the name to Tim Weisburg Band, not just Tim Weisburg. And they all went, yeah, let's do that. Yeah. So now we sat him down and told him that. I said, blah, blah, blah. We do all the music. We do this. We've been touring with you for 3 years. We want some credit, So Tim Weisburg Band. And you went, okay. So then we got invited to all the parties and stuff because now it's a band, not just him.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool too.
Oh, yeah.
We did and we were friends with Flo and Eddie. We were on the same tour circuit.
Oh, happy together.
Two of the funniest guys you've ever been around. God, those guys were funny and sang their asses off.
Oh, yeah.
God, those guys could sing. Jeez.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they were always around and they, on the same tour circuit, and we'd show up, either we had a night off and we stayed at the same hotels.
Oh, that's good.
So if they had a night off, they'd come to our gig. If we had a night off, we'd go to their gig, and then go on, finish up the tour. But so all that was real fun. But at the end of the TWB record, Tim had done a session for Dan Fogelberg. Fogelberg wanted flute on some song, and Tim was at the time the most popular flautist, whatever, in LA. So he became friends with Dan Fogelberg. So we go out on tour, and we walk backstage in New York, and there's Dan Fogelberg. Hi, Dan. And he's got his guitar. So Dan would sit in with us. We'd show up in Denver. There's Dan backstage. Minneapolis, there's Dan. Atlanta, Georgia, there's Dan. Seattle, Washington, there's Dan. So he sat in with us probably 10, 20 times. So after the TWB album, he and Tim had become real good friends, and we never toured on that record. And I kept calling Tim going, hey, we got a new record. When are we going out on the road? He said, well, I'm kind of hanging out with Dan. And I said, Tim, we got to play this new record, man. And he says, and by that time, Christmas had rolled around. And he calls me up and everybody in the band and says, look, Dan wants me to go skiing with him in Switzerland. And I don't have enough money to do it, but I really want to go. And then Dan said, well, if you take your band off salary, look at all the money you'd have, and then you'd be able to go skiing with me. And Tim said that to me on the phone, and I said, no, you're not going to do that. He goes, man, I really hate to, but I really want to go skiing. And I just went, 3 years, we have busted our butts for you. We have written all of your music. We have written on scary airplanes. We've gone through bad weather. We have done everything. And you're going to take us off salary right before Christmas. Yeah, man, I'm really sorry to do that. And I said, yeah, you are. I said, when are we going to play? And he said, well, it'd probably be a year. And I said, well, I got to find a gig. Bye. And that was it. And that's when I called you again. Hey, let's put a band together. You know. Wow. So that was basically all of that, and kept trying original band after original band. And then the music started changing, and you know, then you couldn't get a gig. Then Motley Crue happened.
Oh.
And it was like, oh man, we love how you play, but you don't have enough tattoos to be in the band. You know, it was like, oh, really? Okay. So anyway,
tattoo one up here.
Yeah. So then that whole scene changed, and it just became weird.
That's like early 80s.
Yeah. And then there was a gas crunch, and unless you were a big name, you couldn't afford to go on the road.
Yep.
You know, and we had 3 equipment trucks and his whole crew and all these people, and he took everybody off salary. So times got tough, man.
Yeah. You know, Kathy McDonald's dad worked on the oil tankers or something like that. And when they said there's no gas, there's no oil or anything, she said they had them like lined up like a freaking parking lot out there, just waiting to drive the prices up. And then all of a sudden, okay, so taps open.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back then it was like there was no gas, and then what was it? They had your license number had to be an odd number. You could get gas on odd number days or even number of days, depending on your license number. Lines at gas stations. And then when it hit $1 a gallon, oh, there's gas again. Yeah. Everything's okay. You know? And Jimmy, I hooked up with Jonathan Cain.
Okay.
Who eventually ended up with Journey, but he was just a solo guy.
Okay.
And his producer called me to play drums on his solo album. And I did. And I thought, man, this guy's a good singer, man. And shopped the album around. He and I tried to put a band together, never could find the right guys. And no record company had signed him. And ran into him at a gas station. I had my drums in my El Camino, and he had his drums in this little Pontiac Tempest. He had his keyboard in there, and so we were talking. I said, you know, where are you going? Do you have a gig? He says, no, I got an audition with a band called the Babies.
Babies?
Okay, the Babies.
I remember them. My friend Pierre played bass, and Anne Marie was a backup singer.
Well, Jonathan got the gig, and they opened for Journey for a couple of years. So when Greg Raleigh left Journey, Jonathan already knew the gig because he'd been on tour with him for a couple of years. So Jonathan just stepped right up into that spot, you know. And we're sitting back in North Hollywood going, well, that's nice. I need another gig.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much all of that. Then I had to start playing clubs again, which was kind of funny. Because I remember I had to play this one club with these guys, and I set up my entire set, both bass drums, the whole deal, took up the whole stage. They walked in, He went, "Hey, where are we going to set up?" I said, "Put your amps down on the floor where
The
they
dance floor.
belong." Yeah, the stage is basically a drum riser for me. So yeah,
Yeah.
so that was that, and I just kind of gave up on it after that. I hooked up with Dennis Provisor, who was from the Grassroots, and we put a band together, and we played a couple of gigs around LA. And he decided he was going to move back home, back east.
Before you went, you and I went up to David Geffen's house to try and start a band with him.
Right.
Remember that? And he said, set up in the pool house, and we're like overlooking the Hollywood Nights cover from Bob Seger's Stranger in Town album. I mean, he had a fucking freaking mansion in the pool. He said, yeah, go out, set up in the pool house, have a couple of drinks, call me in the main house when you're ready. We're all set up. We're good. We called him up. He walks out, put his guitar on. We're about ready to start. The phone rings. Honey, it's me. My water just broke. We got to go to the hospital. He said, oh, my wife's pregnant. Well, I'll call you back in a month, you know. And I think he started another group, but not with us.
Right. No, he called me up. He moved to Memphis. He sold that beautiful house, moved to Memphis, where his wife was from, had a couple of kids, and he did an album with Terry Sylvester, who took Graham Nash's place in the Hollies.
Yeah.
And he sang on Tall, Cool Woman in the Black Dress. That was him singing.
Oh, nice.
So he got together with Terry Sylvester, and he called me up in LA and said, hey, man, I want you to play drums on it. I'll fly you down here. And I played drums on that, you know. And
Arden Studio?
Yeah.
It's easy to cut there, too. Yeah, it was big.
And they got signed to Polydor, but we never played a gig.
Huh.
You know, I kept waiting around going, let's play. It just never happened. So I ended up, long story short, just decided to come back to Texas because it was all new wave, and then disco took over, and then there was just no rock bands anymore.
Right. So you started drifting into some blues, right?
Well, I grew up on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being from Texas, I knew how to do all that when I was like 15, 16. I was playing blues stuff. And then I get to LA and I never played any blues, you know, but I knew how to play it. So I remember my mom and my sister lived in Dallas, and I just was doing nothing and called them up, said, look, and I always toured through Dallas. So it was always a fun city. So I called them up and said, look, man, I'm just going to jump on a plane and come over there and see you guys. Okay, sure. So I get there and I asked my sister, I said, so where can I hear some bands? She said, oh, drive down Greenville Avenue. There's a bunch. Okay. I drive down. There was a club on every corner on both sides of the street for 4 miles.
Oh.
And I'm going, holy moly. And 7 nights a week, live music 7 nights a week, every club. And I was just counting them going, oh man, you could play there one night, you play there next night. I said, man, there's so many places to play here. And I went and heard, walked in and heard some bands. They're just doing old blues stuff. And I went, if you want to hear this stuff, I knew 2 guys from my big brother's band that I tracked down and said, say, if you guys can, it was a guitar player and his brother who played bass. They've been playing together for 25 years. And I said, I remember in LA, the Looking for Love thing came in. And then all of the rock guys became cowboys, doing that. Anyway, so I called these guys up and said, if y'all can get to Dallas, we can make a ton. and we can play 7 nights a week if we want to. And so he says, well, how much country would we have to play? I went, none. None? I said, none, not one. Well, what would we play? And I said, everything you were playing in 1965. They were older than me, so they were already playing then. And he went, you're kidding me. And I said, I am not kidding you. I swear to God, everything you were playing in 1965, you come over here, play the same thing. We'll tear this town up. And they showed up, and we were playing 23, 27 gigs a month, making more money than I'd ever made in my life. And had 2 Cadillacs, a 55 Thunderbird, and an El Camino.
Styling, buddy.
Life was good.
Yeah, man.
And that worked for about 5 years.
Oh, gee.
And one-nighters, but Jesus, 23 to 27 gigs a night. And we got into the Dallas Country Club, and they paid real good. And it was a fun period for me.
Yeah. Man. So how did that work into smoking Joe Kubek and Benois King and Tutu Jones and all those guys?
Dallas guys. So I met them all from there. And anyway, there was a period, my mom got sick. So I went back to El Paso for 18 months for that duration, and she passed. And then I went, well, I got to get back to Dallas and get back to work. You know, everybody still knows me. So I did. I went back to Dallas and ran into Kubek, and he was doing pretty good. He cleaned up, got sober, and was playing real good and touring all the time. Tutu Jones, same thing. Friend said, oh, man, you really ought to catch this black guitar player. And then I caught him. I went and saw him and went, I know him. He was a drummer in this band that used to open for my old band. And he picked up a guitar. Now he's a guitar player, and he was real good. He sang like, B.B. King. Oh. Played like, Freddie King. Mm-hmm. So I'm going, okay. So I played with Tutu, got his first album. And
so he used to be a drummer?
He used to be, yeah. So he played guitar like a drummer. He played very percussive guitar. Uh-huh. And he would get into these rhythm grooves, uh-huh. and we'd ride those rhythm grooves, man. And it was real easy to play with him because he was a drummer.
Sure.
He played guitar like a drummer. So he and I had a real good time playing together. Right. And we did some touring, played a bunch of festivals up in Connecticut and around New York. And
you were booked up at the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
On the mall. Tell me about that.
Oh, yeah. He calls me up and says, hey, man, Smithsonian Folk Life or something festival wants us to come up and play 6 days. And it was like, what was it? July the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th or something like that. 4th, 5th, and 6th. So, okay, so we get up there.
You called me and said you were going to be, you called me and said you were going to be there. So
yeah.
Said, I'll come up.
So we were in Washington, D.C., put us up, nice hotel, flew us up there, paid all our expenses. And we played, I think, 3 of those gigs. And then we played the Kennedy Center. Right. And went back to the hotel. And I think this was July the 3rd. No, it was July the 2nd.
Right.
So Tutu and I roomed together. Because, he and I knew each other the longest. So anyway, I crash out after that gig. And he comes in and wakes me up late at night. Says, hey, man, you need to go down to the office. What? He goes, you need to go down to the office and sign some papers. They want to send us home. Okay. Yeah. So I go down there, and the chick, Tutu, had pissed off a couple of people. He's kind of rude. And so he pissed off a couple of sound guys because each gig we played like 2 gigs a day, and they were both in different locations. And he didn't either, like the amp, or he didn't like the PA, and he'd bitch about it. So after the Kennedy Center, which was a cool gig, they decided they didn't want him around, and I had to go down and sign a paper releasing, whatever, and handed us a check, paid us in full for all 6 nights, but flew us back the morning of the 4th of July. So we missed a fireworks show on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Oh. And I'm going, man, that send us back on the 5th. They used to see that fireworks show, man. So anyway, that was the deal with that, and they flew us home. Oh. And then I just went out to a club, and Kubek was playing. And he always had kind of mediocre drummers, local guys who never had any professional experience. But I knew Joe. I'd known him for years, and he was playing somewhere, and he took a break, and his drummer was really weak. And I said, hey, man, how come you played with every drummer in Dallas, but you've never asked me to play with you? He looked at me and went, I don't know. Do you want to play with me? Oh, yeah, I'd love to play with you. And you go, can you be on the road like in 2 days? Yes. Okay, boom, he hired me. And he hands me an itinerary. We were out for 4 months. 4 months straight. I was thinking 6 weeks, a month, We played 100 gigs in 4 months, and the off days were travel days. But I loved playing with him, man. You talk about a strong guitar player and consistent. He was probably the most consistent guitar player I'd ever worked with. And then I played literally hundreds of gigs with Joe. And out of all of those, he never had a bad night. We never walked off the stage and, boy, we really sucked tonight. Some nights were better than others, but he never had a bad night. He was always good. Some nights he was great. And I loved playing with him. But, boy, I was with my wife at the time, and she kind of frowned on being gone 4 months at a time. And I said, you know what? Joe, I love you, man, but, Joe was married and he'd take his wife. So he had his wife with him. So it was a deal of like, I got to go, man. I just can't do this. That's just too much. So I just played local stuff and moved down to Austin and just played, guys down here, hooked up with W.C. Clark, and did some touring with him. And I think it was 2 or 3 years later, I get a call out of the blue from Joe Kubek. And it was funny. So I'm on the phone and I'm talking, and we're talking music and stuff. And Sandy, my wife, walks through and kind of motions like, who are you talking to? Kubek. And she did the cross thing and went, no, not Joe Kubek. No. So, and I took it because I loved playing with him, man. And she said, well, I know you'll be gone a lot, but do it till you get sick of it. I'll be here when you come back. And I went, okay, well, that's good. So I did. Played with him for about another year. And then, the road thing after doing it for, oh God, 45, 48, close to 50 years. It's like, there's no place that, I get with other bands. I did some touring with Long John Hunter, and, we play Canada or something, play Quebec City. We'd walk in, everybody knew me. Hey, Ty, you're back. And everybody in the band would go, how do all these guys know who you are? Because I played here 3 times before. I played here with 3 different bands. So
you're a hard-working drummer, Ty.
It was like, hey, man, I've been here before.
Yeah.
So all that just got real tiring, and that's when I went back with W.C. Clark, because he liked me. And we did longest we were ever out was 10 days. I could handle 10 days, And so that was it. I just stayed in Austin.
Yeah.
Played around. Went out with him every now and then, but played all of, Antone's, just that Saxon Pub, which are the 2 best places to play in Austin, with no desire to go on the road.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're going to Europe. Good, have fun. Been there 8 times.
Man,
8.
That's enough.
Yeah, 8 European tours.
Wow. Well, Ty, it's been so great catching up with you, brother. Here.
Yeah, man.
I think I'll play a little bit of the Force to take us out.
All right, cool.
A little hook, line, and sinker or something. And
all right.
I look forward to getting down there and playing with you and having our last stand at the Alamo, buddy.
Yeah, really. I got a good rocking band now, man.
I can't wait to get up there with you, bud.
Well, it would be fun, man. Can't wait to get you here.
All right, man. Well, thanks so much. Great. Hey, 3rd time's the charm. This is the 3rd time we tried this, and we finally.
That's right. Finally got it together.
Yes, sir. Well, you enjoy your Saturday, Ty. Thanks for coming along on the new segment, Rock Legends Behind the Scenes. Keep loving your heart, a song in your head, and I'll see you down the musical story highway on the next adventure of the old-time rock and roller. So long, my friends. Let's take it out with the Force.
Okay, cool.
Go. All right, brother. Thanks, man.
Love you, man.
Love you too, buddy. Bye-bye.
Bye.